welcome to CALL's Gender Initiative 5th webinar under the theme, Overcoming Barriers and Biases for Women in TVET. The empowerment of women and girls through technical and vocational and training, TVET as we call it in short, gives them an opportunity to acquire job-related skills for meaningful employment, a key contribution to poverty reduction. While governments are working towards improving women's and girls' enrollment in TVET courses, which have been primarily male-dominated, there are multiple barriers for girls to access TVET. To explore these and more, we have arranged this webinar in collaboration with CALL's TVSD initiative. Welcome my colleague, Ms. Terry Neal, CALL's Education Specialist for TVSD. Terry, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Frances. And thank you all for joining us for this important topic. While we've made significant progress for girls' participation in primary and secondary education, and unfortunately COVID-19 has set us back a bit, once we get to the area of skills development and who does what in the labour market, there are still significant gender gaps. Males are more likely to access TVET. Those women who access TVET are more likely to train for less productive, lower paid and lower status jobs, and less likely to engage in STEM-related training and occupations. Those who do train are less likely to find employment in their area of training, and the situation worsens as women take time out for childbearing. Collectively, as a world, we need solutions, and even more so with COVID-19 disproportionately affecting women. The good news is that we have examples of what is working to make a difference. And today we have the opportunity to hear different perspectives from women who are part of the solution. We're going to start with the global perspective, and I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker, Nazreen Mani. Nazreen has been successfully navigating the interface between education and training and industry for nearly 2 decades. She is a specialist in social policy, focused on skills development, reducing youth unemployment, and strategies to prepare for work of the future. A South African, she has worked in multi-sector organizations in her home country and in international projects before moving to Switzerland to take up her present role as Executive Director GAN Global, where she and her team work with multinational corporations and international organizations to accelerate skills development across the globe through workplace learning and enabling policy environments. Nazreen is passionate about seeing more women develop skills and find full, productive, and decent work. She will now give us a global perspective on overcoming bias and barriers for women in TVET. Over to you, Nazreen.
Thank you, Terry, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. You know, this topic is so important. It's become clear that there are issues despite all of the efforts, but I'd like to think that organizations like the Global Apprenticeship Network, like the Commonwealth of Learning, we're actively engaging in partnership and collaboration, 1, to create awareness of the issue, and 2, to really find solutions that are meaningful, that will have depth and will shift the issue. So the Global Apprenticeship Network is a private sector-led entity established in 2013 to really drive youth employment using apprenticeships as a vehicle. In 2018, we shifted our strategy to be slightly more encompassing, and in the face of the future of work, have decided to look at all segments of the workforce and using work-based learning as the mechanism to drive skilling of the workforce. That's new entrants into the workforce, those of us who've been in the workforce for some years, as well as those of us who are exiting the workforce, because each of us have knowledge, skills, and experience that we can share. And it's critically important that we address this issue of a jobs and skills mismatch, but more importantly for today's discussion, that this is done with this gender lens, which is critical at the moment. And as Terry has said, COVID has exacerbated many of these issues. If we look at the issue of the SDGs, we're seeing that, in fact, we've probably been set back at least a decade in many of our development initiatives, which really is something we cannot afford to do at this point in time in the world. Now, the global gender issue is something I think many of those on the call will understand, will know. I myself am a Geneva gender champion under the UN initiative. And what that means is that we take responsibility as leaders in our organizations to ensure that we're looking at equality, we're looking at gender diversity, we're looking at access and inclusion. And those are key issues if we're meant to meet the needs for SDG 5. And we know that our targets remain unreached. We've seen that with COVID, early marriage is now increasing. And those are issues that are going to have a long-term impact. Those are generational issues if we don't address these. But we desperately need to ensure that we give young women access to education, and not just basic education. We need to ensure that they move on to further education and training, into post-school education and training, so that they can see that they have the opportunity for leadership roles, whether it is in government, whether it is in private sector, but even in the home, understanding that women have rights, have opportunities within their communities, that's key. The other really concerning issue of COVID has been the global increase in gender violence. And I think here again, education plays a significantly important role in addressing these. And then we also know that the issue of women being these frontline workers, nurses, care workers, they're right front and center in terms of exposure to COVID, but also taking on these additional unpaid work routines in the home that COVID has brought on. So a number of issues that COVID has exacerbated, unfortunately, in the last 8 months. But importantly for today's conversation is this issue of gender equality in TVET. And we've seen a number of challenges, a number of barriers. And as the GAN, we work in 15 countries. We've just added New Zealand, so now 16 countries across our networks, as well as a range of partner countries. And what is fascinating for us is it doesn't matter the kind of level of development. So whether it's a developing country or developed country, these barriers exist. And we have to ask the question, why? Why, if we are working collectively as the private sector, as governments, as social partners, are we not able to address a number of these barriers in a way that should by now have eradicated this conversation? But I think that there are some key issues, and for me, a lot of the issues actually stem from the home, from the community angle. And I'm going to quickly go through this list. Many of you would have seen it, but we know, for example, that parents don't see vocational education as a first choice, which is quite interesting because the data and all of the research points to the fact that many meaningful job pathways exist in vocational education. And in fact, we're starting to see new research and there has been some work done on this issue of return on investment, that those students who go through the apprenticeship route, who take the vocational trade occupation route, actually can earn far more than an ordinary university graduate. So quite fascinating. It's an issue of perception, a lack of understanding. So those of us as practitioners in the space have a lot of work to do to overcome these perceptions and myths about vocational education not being a suitable pathway to the labor market. The same about this route to a good job. We've seen really important data showing that, again, those students who've gone the vocational route, who are working, actually are in safer employment than many other sectors, particularly at the moment. This issue of lack of benefits of apprenticeships, I'm starting to see more and more work being done demonstrating the positive news, this issue of return on investment, the issue of long-term ability for learning, this issue of moving across portability of skills. So the Swiss system is a really good example where you can build on your apprenticeship qualification and move into university to do a degree. Ireland is doing something similar. Germany has had a system like that for many years. The UK is doing great work, along with several other countries in the developing world. So there is an appreciation, I think, an increased appreciation from policymakers who are linking apprenticeship qualifications to the national qualifications framework, allowing for this flexibility, transfer of skills, and the opportunity to increase the level of qualification using the apprenticeship qualification as the base. This occupationally directed relevant experience, this is a bit of a chicken and egg situation, because we've often had this challenge where employers say they can't hire the person because they don't have the experience, but how will they get the experience if you don't hire the individual? And we're working as the GAN directly with companies, encouraging employers, big and small employers, to take on learners, to give them experience during the course of study, so while they're in college or university, and then to ensure that they have the relevant work exposure even post-studies. Because a few years ago, I managed a construction-related program in vocational education, and we did a really interesting survey that showed that if a learner has work experience during their course of study, they have an 80% better chance of being employed post-qualification. So it's critically important that employers play a big role and link the college to the labor market to understand the needs of the workplace. This issue of jobs and skills mismatch comes up, but how do we solve that problem unless we bring learners into the workplace? And here it's particularly important that we need to bring young women in. This issue of confidence is a big one. Many young girls in school do better than boys in maths and science, but what we find is that when they leave school, they don't go into those routes of study. And we need to get to the bottom of that. Why is it? Why do they not feel confident enough to take on those qualifications post-school? Are we not giving them the relevant counseling, the mentorship, the guidance? And then Terry pointed to this issue of stereotyping occupations. So we see that when it comes to vocational education, young women tend to go for hairdressing, or they go for business studies, or they go for catering. Why is that? We need to ensure that we create this enabling environment that the GAN speaks about, where there's a set of policies that allow for young women and even older women who want to develop themselves to be able to come in, create a safe space, create a system that allows for flexible entry, that allows for this agile learning. And I think the one positive of COVID for me is that we've learned that we can learn in different ways. You don't have to be in a classroom from 8 to 5 every day. So you can learn offline, you can learn remotely, you can use digital means, because we know that many women have other responsibilities. That previous slide showed the kind of expectations of women from society. So if a young mother wants to come in and do an engineering qualification, but it's strictly 8 to 5 and she has childcare issues, the likelihood is she will find another course. But we need to shift these ways of working and engaging, and the system is key for that. The system needs to be safe, it needs to be enabling. The cultural barriers are key. As Terry said, I'm South African, and I've seen firsthand issues of patriarchy which impact on the choice of study. Issues of patriarchy that then impact in the workplace when young women move into the workplace, are promoted, particularly, and Jumoke may speak to this because she's a young engineer, working with men who may not want to take instruction from a young woman, this issue of cultural barriers where you have to be subservient. These are very real issues, not to be discounted in terms of impacting on transitions for women into TVET. And then this issue of role models is so important. Who are the role models that young girls can look up to? Powerful, dynamic women who've been through this experience, who've walked this road, who have seen how challenging it can be and who've overcome the challenges. And I think that's the message that we need to give. These exclusive recruitment policies and discrimination go hand in hand. And often we see sometimes these are unstated or unwritten, but they exist. So again, from my experience in the manufacturing sector, the construction sector, the issue of strength is this unspoken rule that you must be able to carry your toolbox. And the assumption is that women can't do that. So the companies are always surprised when you get a cohort of women coming in and they're very capable. They don't need somebody to help them. They're committed, they're determined, and they can get on with the job. And then this issue of equality and diversity, I think the timing is so important because we're seeing a global movement at the moment, looking at diversity and inclusion, looking at very focused strategies to bring in people of color, the gender issue, people with disabilities. And I think it's an exciting time to build on this momentum and to ensure that we can have these strategies that can drive women and girls into vocational education. We know that it's a competitive environment, especially in a post-COVID world where apprenticeship spaces may be reduced. But I think, again, we have to make sure that we allow equal opportunity. And when we say allow for equal opportunity, it must be done meaningfully at all levels of the organization. My other challenge, and this is firsthand experience, is that CEOs make these commitments, but when it comes to the shop floor, when it comes to the factory floor, when it comes to the construction site, you need all levels of buy-in to ensure that we're able to drive these strategies and to address these challenges. But I think what's been exciting for me, I've worked very closely recently with the International Labour Organization, and the ILO sets international global standards on apprenticeships. And there's a lot of work being done around quality apprenticeships. And the ILO has acknowledged the very low participation rates of women in vocational education and have implored employers and governments to really take focused action to grow these numbers. And some suggestions from the ILO strategy, and we've seen GAN members starting to do this as well, is target setting. Have a very deliberate strategy to hire X number of women a year, or even for a college to ensure enrollment in these scarce and critical skills of X number of women and girls. Career guidance is key. And career guidance is not just for the learners. Career guidance needs to happen at a community level, at a household level, at a teacher level in schools. We're doing a very interesting project in Argentina at the moment as the GAN, where we're training 500 school teachers on vocational education because they don't understand what the vocational education system offers. They don't understand the kinds of trades you can go into, the kinds of career pathways. So it's really about educating all of us in this space. And then having this drive to bring young women and girls into STEM, so the science, technology, engineering, and maths. And a new movement is pushing for the arts because there are a number of careers that fall under the arts, so the new orange economy that is gaining traction, and how do we grow that? And that arts field covers everything from fashion design to graphic design to painting. It's quite fascinating, but it offers a really, really meaningful job creation opportunity in many countries. Number 3 is an interesting one. Very deliberate reservation of spaces for women. And I think we're at a point where perhaps we need to look at that quite seriously if we're not shifting the numbers. And then, as I said, working with local schools, the TVET. So I managed a program a few years ago called the College Industry Partnership. And again, it's about really deliberately linking colleges to the private sector to ensure that you can build the capacity of the college, but you can also show opportunity for the learners, particularly women. The mentorship issue is one that's becoming increasingly important in all aspects of work. And I think, again, the mentorship issue also links to having these positive role models. Diversity training, in post-apartheid South Africa, we used to have lots of diversity training to really understand how to engage with one another. And then we stopped as if we wouldn't have to continually learn and develop. And I think perhaps it's time that globally we start to do this kind of training. How to respect one another, how to engage with different kinds of people, how to engage with different genders. And it doesn't matter where you're from. I think we need to really rethink how we work with one another. And this issue of respect is becoming so important. Language is an interesting one because we often use we talk about unconscious bias when we speak about diversity and inclusion. And certain types of roles are advertised and it has an implicit meaning that it's for men. So women read it and may not want to apply. So you'll see roles, for example, that talk about 50% of travel. And again, if you have responsibilities as a woman at home, childcare, etc., that may immediately put you off. Or the role may require you to go far out to site, far away from family, etc. So how do we ensure that our language shifts? How do we create the safe space to convince women and girls to come into these roles? And then this issue of affordability and flexibility is key. I think for me, that's probably one of the biggest issues preventing many women from accessing vocational education careers, even post-school. So lots of interesting work, but I think we're on the right track. I think there is this global acknowledgement that we aren't doing enough. And I think there are some very specific strategies that we can look at implementing, whether in our public organizations, in our public policy, but also in our private sector entities, in employers, as well as the college, the vocational system, which is key in attracting learners and then linking these learners to the labor market.
Thank you so much, Nazreen. It's wonderful to hear both the big picture view and some specific examples. So next, I would like to hand over to Jumoke. She's Jumoke Olatunji. She's been training me in pronouncing her name correctly. An inspiring young woman from Nigeria who is an example of some of the things that Nazreen was talking about just now. She was one of only 5 females in a class of 50 studying industrial maintenance engineering at Yaba College of Technology. Following completion of that study, she was selected from thousands of applicants to be one of 2 females in a cohort of 20 to train in Nestlé's Training Centre's apprenticeship program. And she's since then been working for 2 years as an engineer at Nestlé. She will now share with us her story of how she overcame bias and barriers. Over to you, Jumoke.
Okay, so I will be telling my story. This is me currently working on an engine. This is one of the engines we have for Nestlé's tri-generation plants in Agbara factory. Early in my life, I had always been ambitious. I had always been the tough one in my family. I come from a family of 4 girls with my mom as the breadwinner of my family. And I was always the one helping my dad because there was no boy in my family. Literally, I was the one helping him with all the masculine tasks in the house, such as fixing the car tires, changing the bulbs. So this set me out early in life for my current career engineering. My dad believed in us girls so much, and he always told us that there was nothing that we couldn't achieve. He would show me Okonjo Iweala on television and always told me that I could be just like her. And also Dora Quinley, the then Director General for NAFDAC in Nigeria. So each time we watch TV, he would show me all those women and tell me that I could be exactly like them. So this set me out with the right frame of mind early in my life. And moving on, I moved on to study industrial maintenance engineering in Yaba College of Technology. It wasn't easy for me to gain admission because I wrote JAM 3 times. Eventually, I was admitted as a part-time student in Yaba College of Technology. At this time, I also enrolled for network engineering at NIT. So I would go to NIT in the morning for morning lectures and also go for evening classes for my engineering course at Yaba College of Technology. But I knew I wanted to do more. I wanted to be able to do something with my hands. I wanted more than just the books. So this drive led me to Nestle Technical Training Center, and I was so excited when I finally got admitted because there were more than 10,000 applicants. In fact, there was a stage that I didn't know I could scale through because I didn't even see any other lady when I came for that interview. Only after the admission, I discovered that we were two ladies. This is my journey through the training center. This is me super excited on my first day at the training. And at the center, I learned a lot of hands-on skills. I had access to machines. I was able to learn maintenance skills, automation skills, troubleshooting skills. And all of this has helped me, and even in the current role I am as an engineering technician. And the journey through this training center wasn't so easy. There was this particular course that was so challenging for me in level 3. It's engineering science. It took me so much to be able to study and pass that course. When I finished and had a merit in that course, I was so happy. It made me more determined that if I could pass engineering science, there was nothing that was going to be too difficult for me to pass. So I was happy, and I'm still happy that I was able to graduate from the training center after acquiring so much skills. I had various inspirations at the training center, starting off with Mark Schneider, which is the CEO of Nestle Worldwide. We had a one on one session with him when he came to the factory and came to the center. He told us how his determination and resilience had helped him through the ranks as the CEO for Nestle South Africa to the CEO of Nestle Worldwide. And it's important for me because I didn't just draw inspiration from only ladies, I had even male figures in my life that helped me, that inspired me, that motivated me. The next picture is Bumi Etimfon. She is currently the plant manager for culinary plant. Then she would come to the center and spoke to us as ladies. She always told us being a lady doesn't make you less capable, right? And she came from a humble background just like myself. It was so inspiring and important to me that the path that I was about to start, there was someone who had risen through it, who had gone through it and had succeeded at it. So she also inspired me. Currently, this is my class, this is my batch of NTTC with me at the front. I'm not a very big person, so I'm always in the front of every group picture. So, yes, all through my life as a young female engineer, mm, one major challenge that we face is that people just take one look at you and assume that you cannot do the job, especially in male dominated fields like engineering, where a lot of physical activity is involved. It is not very easy for ladies to catch up. And it was at this time I appreciated the female colleagues I had all through my career. I'm going to focus on TTC. Precious, she was, in fact, we were like sisters. She was always there to support me on days where menstrual cramps would be so difficult. And sometimes when you have mood swings that wouldn't even let you concentrate in class, she was there for me. So even though the ratio of guys to ladies was like 90-10 in my class at the training center. I never really felt alone because there was someone else, there was someone beside me that could understand all my girl issues. And it was a similar story even at Yaba Tech. We're 5 girls, and every time we had to do night classes, we had to study, we were always together every time. So this helped me to have a support system for my female colleagues. Another major challenge we face as ladies is not being enough. Psychologically, when you see a female engineer, when you get to the shop floor and you want to work on a machine, people just look at you and they feel you can't even do it, right? But it has to take determination. It took me determination and resilience to be able to overcome that. Today, I have now earned the confidence of my colleagues because I can now perform my tasks successfully even without help from other people, right? And I look beyond what people tell me. I look beyond what people expect of me. I'm self-motivated, so when I go to the line, irrespective of whatever it is, I'm able to carry on and press on. So this is what I do now. This is my life every day as an engineering technician. All the knowledge and mental capability increment that have come to me as a result of all the institutions I've been to have helped me greatly to add value to my team. Here I was getting a recognition for contributing greatly to my team. For me, the journey continues. I am definitely not where I want to be yet. I hope to one day be the first female factory manager for Agbara factory. And I know that I've not gotten there yet, but I know that I have everything I need to. I have the right skills, I have the right attitude, and I have the right people to help me achieve that. So this is my story, how I've been able to overcome barriers and still overcoming barriers and biases as a young female engineer in Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jumoke, for sharing your inspiring story. We had hoped to have a third speaker that would be talking to us about their experience at the institutional level, but unfortunately they've been unable to join us at this time. But I think we have plenty of interesting points made by our 2 speakers. I want to thank our 3 panelists very much for your contributions tonight. I'd also like to acknowledge Francis and Nara Jelly and the whole Commonwealth Wise Woman initiative, which is picking up on this amongst other issues and challenges that we face in terms of dealing with these gender gaps that many of us are aware of. So let's not stop talking and let's not stop acting. This is just the beginning, and I hope all of you out there, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you're inspired as I have been, inspired by these stories, but also inspired to take action and make a difference yourselves. Thank you all.